The Nun was an absolute disgrace of a movie that crapped all over the good name of the Conjuring franchise, which I just covered a few weeks ago and clearly demonstrated my love for it. And though I could remain on a positive streak, when I learned that they made a sequel to one of the biggest disappointments I've ever seen, I just had to dig right in. Now, interestingly enough, the critics and fans seem to hate this sequel far less than the first Nun movie, and the opening scene gives us some idea as to why. It takes its time, preys on childhood fear a bit like the Conjuring movies always did, and crescendos with an incredibly disturbing moment of this priest getting immolated. Additionally, the first dialogue scene between Sister Irene from the last movie and this new character, a nun who's doubtful about her faith, does more to develop the characters than the entirety of the last movie, so we're really taking steps in the right direction. Soon enough, though, we get reintroduced to the French-Canadian guy from the last movie, and he's as much of a scourge on this movie as ever. This entire secondary plotline about him working at a boarding school does eventually lead into the entire finale, and I totally understood their noble intentions here. You see, they try to set up this friendship between the French-Canadian and a little girl at the school who's picked on by her classmates. It is a good attempt to humanize the characters, if I'm being fair. But the problem arises from the fact that it's done very poorly, mainly by the actor of Maurice, that's the French guy. He's seriously insufferable and makes every scene he's in far worse. Not to mention these cringe-worthy scenes of the little girl being picked on, which are borderline unwatchable and feel like a true waste of time at their cores. And the horror aspects really aren't that good for most of the movie. They shouldn't have even had horror scenes this early into the film if you ask me, but they could have at least had them be less abrupt, poorly edited, and all around pointless. Rather than building dread and suspense about a horrific haunting like the Conjuring movies did, this feels like they're treating the audience like little puppies, throwing us a treat every 10 minutes to make sure we don't turn the movie off due to the boring characters and lack of anything interesting at play. But just one small problem, though. I'm not a dog, so these treats taste like shit to me. And not just the horror and characters suck, but the dialogue, too. While the first dialogue scene between the two nuns was very good, this one in the train car is an absolute insult. It feels like a scene in some poorly written Christian movie that's designed to convert people, and that's really reinforced by the fact that the only slight bit of character development in this waste of a movie is that the other nun grows to believe in God. Man, I'm trying to get creeped out by this movie, not converted. There are so many scenes that demonstrate a dire lack of subtlety, such as when they show this thing underneath a sheet's head tilt. It's almost like they think we're idiots or something, because it would have been a much better scene if you just saw it in the background and then it came to life, rather than spoiling the whole scene right off the bat. And I get really tired of the constant scenes of the nun just standing at the end of a hallway. This all feels extremely pointless, but at the very least, we do get treated to the most visually interesting moment of the film, with these magazine pages flipping to create the shape of the nun. That is a legitimately cool and inventive bit, I will give them that. There's also a compelling death scene where the ghost of an altar boy beats this old lady to death with a thurible. It's creepy, well-paced, and a creative death. Gotta give them credit. But even those two small highlights, and the fact they go to Palais des Papes, which I've been to and highly recommend by the way, don't save this movie from being a complete and utter disappointment. The Nun II demonstrates how ridiculously stupid of a movie it is perfectly with these two scenes right here, where the guy working at Palais des Papes at first says he's a glorified librarian and isn't qualified to talk about the demon, but then just minutes later is the one instructing the nuns all about it. These writers have the memory spans of a goddamn goldfish even when it comes to the own crap that they've written. We're soon launched into a finale that really drags on without much to offer. I will say that the sort of House of Horrors approach here is somewhat intriguing, as they don't just have the possessed Maurice causing havoc, but also a creepy goat creature and the rotting reanimated corpse of the lady who died earlier. But where there's variety, there's a lack of focus and cohesion that really hurts the movie. It once again devotes itself to throwing something new in the audience's face every few minutes, rather than compelling tension or writing of any kind. And once again, they defeat the monster with just any old MacGuffin that they randomly find. There's not much of a struggle, they just use it and win, kind of like in the last movie. Now, they do end up getting dunked on when Maurice rises again and the nun comes out, meaning they aren't done with this whole shebang, but that feels more like the movie is dragging on than any sort of compelling twist or turn. The Conjuring had a certain way to beat the threat too, but it was always a difficult, intense process with a lot of drama behind it, and it was basically set up throughout the whole movie in a compelling way. But this movie just has them use a magical object and win. It's like how in those terrible Zelda CDI games you kill the boss by just throwing an item on the ground, whereas in the other Zelda games you actually have to use it in a clever way and fight the boss in an intense segment. Like, yeah, you're using the item in both, but there's more to it than that. The nun's face contorts and looks ridiculous once again, and by the time this awkward and stupid pause comes around...
Are you okay? Yes. That was a miracle.
I'm really just on my last nerve with this damn movie. But then they have to go and defeat the nun by praying. Are you kidding me? This all-powerful demon was defeated by having its identity revealed in The Conjuring 2, which was a hidden piece of information, so it worked. In the last Nun movie, it was done with the blood of Christ, which, even though the movie was done poorly, also makes sense. But just a regular old prayer does it this time? Well, damn, why didn't they just do that at the very beginning? Then the whole movie wouldn't have had to happen. And then the ending has nothing else left to say, the characters just silently say goodbye, and I'm left there watching with a face of shock and anger as to how stupid some people can be. I mean it. How dumb do you have to be to make this movie? Or even worse, look at it after the fact and greenlight it? But that's what it comes down to, is that they don't care. These Nun movies were not made out of passion for the franchise, characters, or for horror films in general. They were made because The Conjuring 2 did really well, and they knew they could make bank off of a generic spin-off horror film involving an iconic antagonist. And it worked, because the first Nun crushed it at the box office. But that all has a cost more severe than any amount of dollars. Namely, that these two movies indeed feel like The Conjuring, just with every ounce of cleverness, passion, heart, wit, or care sucked dry. 1 out of 5, not even a cameo by the Warrens at the end, can save this heaping pile of steaming goat shit. Okay, what horror movie should I review next?